Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time. And way back in space. We're heading to Imperial China, specifically the late Qing dynasty, around the end of the 19th century. And you are a little girl. Don't get too excited, though. If we're being brutally honest about the setting, your chances of surviving childhood are, let's just say, not modern. But tonight, we're not focusing on that. We're focusing on a different kind of survival. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support truly makes these journeys possible. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments what city you're listening from, and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The world, for you, is the size of a courtyard. It's a dusty, sun-baked square of packed earth, framed by the grey brick walls of your family home. This is your universe, and for now, it feels infinite. You are maybe 5, perhaps 6 years old. Age is a fluid thing here, marked more by seasons and height than by specific numbers. What you know for sure is the feeling of the sun on your neck and the rough, warm ground beneath your bare feet. Your days are a symphony of simple sounds. The rhythmic thwack, 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 thwack of your mother beating laundry against a smooth river stone. The distant, clinking chatter of your grandfather's friends playing mudhorn under the shade of the ginkgo tree. The high-pitched, drowsy buzz of cicadas that seems to make the summer air thick and heavy. You are a part of this symphony, a frantic, joyful little melody. You dart across the courtyard, chasing a rooster who, frankly, seems to enjoy the game as much as you do. You scramble behind the giant ceramic water vat, its sides cool against your back. Your giggles muffled as your older cousin seeks you out in a game of hide and seek. Your feet are your wings. They are strong, wide, and perpetually smudged with the dirt of your world. They carry you everywhere. You can balance on the narrow edge of the well, peering into its dark, cool depths. You can squat for an hour, utterly fascinated by an ant colony building its empire along a crack in the wall. You can leap over puddles left by the morning rain, your simple cotton trousers hitched up to your knees. This freedom of movement is as natural to you as breathing. It is the essence of your childhood. Your mother watches you. She sits on a low wooden stool, her hands busy with mending, but her eyes are often on you. There's a deep, unwavering love in her gaze, the kind that makes you feel like the safest person in the world. But sometimes, a shadow passes through them. A flicker of something complex. Is it worry, sadness? You see it when you stumble and fall. Skinning your knee, she rushes over. But after cleaning the wound, her hand lingers on your ankle, her thumb stroking the top of your foot. The look is gone as quickly as it came, replaced by her usual gentle smile. Life is structured around women. Your father and grandfather are respected, revered figures, but they are often absent, either at work, in the front rooms entertaining guests, or simply existing in a separate, masculine world. The courtyard, the kitchen, the bedrooms, this is the domain of your mother, your grandmother, your aunts, and your older sister. It's a world of shared tasks and quiet communication. You learn by watching them how to fan the charcoal stove just right, how to sort good beans from bad, how to twist thread onto a spindle. As a special treat for your birthday, your mother has sewn you a new tunic, and with it, a tiger hat. It's a marvelous thing, a cap embroidered with a fierce, wide-eyed tiger face, complete with little ears that stick up. It's a common bit of folk magic, a belief that the spirit of the mighty tiger will protect a vulnerable child from sickness and evil spirits. When you wear it, you feel invincible. You puff out your chest and chase the chickens with renewed vigor, letting out what you imagine is a fearsome roar. Your grandmother, usually stone, cracks a smile. She tells you that a healthy, spirited girl is a blessing. But later, you hear her whispering to your mother, Her feet are getting so big. It will only be more painful the longer we wait. You don't understand what they mean. You only know that your older sister, who is already 12, doesn't run, she glides. She takes tiny, mincing steps, her body swaying gently like a willow branch. You think it looks incredibly elegant and grown up. Sometimes, when you play, you try to imitate her, taking impossibly small steps across the courtyard. It feels silly, and you quickly give up, breaking into a run. Your sister just watches you, a faint, unreadable smile on her face. The true, lived experience of mothers in this era remains a point of intense debate among historians. Were they simply agents of a patriarchal tradition? Or were they making what they believed was a heart-wrenching but necessary sacrifice for their daughters' futures? As you look at your own mother, humming a lullaby while she stitches a tiny, ornate shoe, you can't possibly comprehend the conflict raging behind her calm eyes. All you know is the feel of the earth under your feet, the warmth of the sun, and the comforting sound of her voice. To know, that is enough. The tiny shoe your mother is working on sits in her lap like a captured butterfly. It's a work of art, no bigger than your fist. The silk is a vibrant scarlet, embroidered with impossibly delicate blue lotus flowers and golden threads that catch the low evening light. You creep closer, mesmerized. You've seen your older sister's shoes, of course, but you've never been this close to one in the making. You reach out a curious finger to touch the smooth, tight stitching. Your mother's hand gently covers yours, stopping you. She smiles, but the smile doesn't reach her eyes. She puts the shoe and her needlework away in a wooden box, the lid closing with a soft, final click. The atmosphere in the courtyard is changing, shifting like the seasons. The long, hot days of summer are giving way to the crisper air of autumn. The cicadas have fallen silent, replaced by the chirping of crickets in the evenings. And with this change in season comes a change in the tenor of the women's conversations. Be sure, their talk was of recipes, local gossip, and the price of rice. Now, a new word seems to flutter at the edges of their discussions. A word you keep catching like a stray feather in the wind. Future. Their voices drop to a hush whenever you wander near. You'll be chasing a dragonfly near the kitchen door and hear your aunt say, "The matchmaker was asking about her. A good family. But they will be very particular." And then, silence. Your mother will see you, and their conversation will pivot instantly to the weather or the quality of the new tea. You start to feel like a secret is being kept from you. A heavy, adult secret that whirls just out of your grasp. You don't understand the words matchmaker or particular, but you understand the sudden quiet. You understand the way they look at you. And then, pointedly, down at your feet as you stand there in the dirt. One evening, your mother draws a basin of warm water to wash your feet before bed. This is a familiar ritual, comforting and warm. But tonight, it feels different. She kneels before you, her hands moving with their usual gentleness as she lathers the soap. But then her movements slow. Her thumbs press into the arch of your foot, not hard, but with a firm, probing pressure. She traces the line of each toe, her brow furrowed in concentration. It's no longer the touch of a mother washing her child. It's the touch of a craftsman evaluating her material. She lifts your foot out of the water, wrapping it in a soft cloth, and holds it in her lap for a long moment, her gaze distant and full of a sorrow so deep it frightens you. You wriggle your toes, trying to break the spell. She blinks, as if waking from a dream, and gives you a quick, almost frantic hug. The core of this entire tradition, the mainstream historical fact that governed your life, was this ironclad link to marriage. A girl's feet were her primary asset. A pair of perfectly bound 3-inch golden lotuses was a sign of beauty, refinement, and, most importantly, high status. It signaled that her family was wealthy enough that she would never need to labor. It was her ticket to a good marriage, which in turn secured her family's social standing. A girl with natural, unbound feet, a big-footed girl, was often seen as coarse, peasant-like, and virtually unmarriageable. at least to a family of any consequence. Your future didn't depend on your wit or your health, but on the size and shape of your feet. This is the source of your mother's worry. She's not just looking at your feet, she's looking at your entire life path. She sees a future of security, of being well cared for, of honor to the family, and the only gateway to that future is through this ritual. But the path is fraught with peril. It's here we find a strange, and somewhat chilling, bit of trivia. The process was not begun on a whim. The family would consult an almanac to select an auspicious day. They believed that choosing the right date, guided by cosmology and divination, could lessen the pain, reduce the risk of infection, and ensure a more perfect result. You see your mother and grandmother huddled over the tongue sheet, the traditional Chinese almanac. Its pages filled with red and black characters and cryptic charts. They whisper, their fingers tracing the columns, searching for the perfect cosmic alignment to begin breaking your bones. Your older sister watches you more these days. Her own movements are a constant, swaying dance of restraint. She sees you leap from a store, landing solidly on your two healthy feet, and a flicker of something pity memory crosses her face. One afternoon, she finds you trying to balance a pebble on your nose. She sits beside you, not speaking for a long time. Then she simply says, "It will hurt very much, but you must be brave. Crying only makes mother sad." She says it with a flat, emotional finality that is more terrifying than any warning. Historians still grapple with the psychology of the mothers who performed this. Some scholars argue it was the ultimate, albeit brutal, act of maternal love, a mother inflicting terrible pain to shield her daughter from the future pain of poverty and social ostracism. Others suggest a more complex psychological landscape, wondering if, for women who had no power or agency in the outside world, controlling and sculpting their daughters' bodies was one of the few domains where they could exercise absolute authority. As you watch your own mother, her face a mask of resolute love and hidden anguish, you are the living embodiment of that historical question. All you know is that the wind is colder now, the leaves on the ginkgo tree are turning yellow, and the date in the almanac is drawing near. The day arrives. There is no thunder, no dramatic omen. The morning dawns just like any other autumn day, with a pale, watery sun and a chill that clings to the shadows of the courtyard. But the air is different. It's thick with a quiet, purposeful tension. Your grandmother is up before dawn, burning incense at the small family altar, the sweet, cloying smoke wafting through the house. Your mother isn't mending or sorting beans. She is simply waiting. You are given a special breakfast. A small bowl of rice congee with a sweet date and a few lotus seeds bobbing in the pearly liquid. Your mother tells you the lotus seeds will make your feet grow as beautifully as the lotus flower. You eat it obediently, not understanding the symbolism, only that it's a treat. After you eat, you're already given a bath. Not the usual quick wash in a basin, but a full immersion in a large wooden tub. The water is scented with herbs and petals, things meant to soften your skin and, supposedly, your bones. It feels luxurious, and for a moment, you forget the strange, heavy atmosphere. You splash and play, but your mother's silence is a heavy blanket. She washes you with a solemnity that feels more like a religious rite than a bath. Afterward, you are dressed not in your usual sturdy cotton trousers, but in a new pair of bright red ones. Red for luck, red for celebration. Red, you will later learn, to hide the blood. You are led to the king, the heated brick platform bed in your mother's room. It's the warmest, most central place in the women's quarters. Your grandmother is there, her face is stern, unreadable mask. Your aunt is there, fussing with things, her movements jerky and nervous. The door is closed. The rest of the world, the sunlit courtyard, the crowing rooster, feels a million miles away. You are sat on the edge of the bed. Your mother sits on a low stool in front of you, her lap full of the necessary tools. There's a pile of long, tightly woven cotton bandages, each several feet long. There's a needle and thick thread, a small, sharp knife, a basin of alum water, which is said to prevent infection and control odor, and a large rock. It's all laid out on a clean cloth with terrifying neatness. Your heart starts to beat a little faster. This isn't a game. This isn't a story. The expression on your mother's face is one you have never seen before. Her love is still there, deep in her eyes, but it's overlaid with a grim, almost frightening determination. She takes your right foot in her hands. "This is for your future," she says, her voice steady. But you can feel a slight tremor in her hands. A woman's virtues in her walk. A good husband will see the sun cherish you. She speaks the words as if reciting a scripture. Something she has perhaps been told her entire life. Something she is now passing on to you. It's the mainstream history lesson of the day, delivered not in a classroom, but in a dim-lit bedroom. Moments before the trauma begins, the practice was so deeply ingrained that it was seen as a fundamental part of raising a proper girl, as essential as teaching her embroidery or household duties. Your grandmother places a hand on your shoulder. "Do not struggle," she commands, her voice leaving no room for argument. "It will only make it worse. Be a good daughter." This is where we encounter a lesser known, but profoundly significant detail of the ritual, the spiritual and psychological preparation. This wasn't just a physical procedure, it was a rite of passage, steeped in tradition and superstition. Often, the girl would be made to pray to Guan Yin, the Buddhist full of compassion, or to a foot deity known as the tiny-footed maiden. The idea was to seek divine blessing for the process, to frame the impending pain as a noble, almost holy sacrifice. In some households, the girl was given a sugar cube or a piece of candy to hold in her mouth, with the instruction that she was not to cry until it had completely dissolved. It was a cruel psychological tool, a way to enforce stoicism and delay the inevitable screams. Your mother takes the small knife and carefully, meticulously, cuts your toenails. She cuts them as far back as she can, until they almost bleed. She is cleaning the canvas before she begins her work. Then she picks up your foot again, massaging it with the alum water, her fingers working the muscles and ligaments, making them pliable. Her touch is still gentle, but it's the gentleness of a butcher tenderizing meat. You look past her, out the small, paper-covered window. You can see a corner of the blue sky. You can hear your older cousin laughing about something in the courtyard. It's a normal day out there, but in this room, time has stopped. It has narrowed down to this single moment, this single point of focus: your mother's hands, and your own small, perfect foot, which is about to be destroyed. Historians have long debated the exact age considered ideal for starting the process. The consensus generally lands between the ages of 4 and 7. The reasoning, grimly practical, was that at this age the bones in a child's arch were still composed of soft, not yet fully hardened cartilage, making them easier to break and reshape. Waiting longer meant the bones would be more developed, and the pain would be exponentially greater. As you sit there, on the cusp of 6, your family believes they have chosen the perfect, fateful moment. The yellow road, the Huangdao, has led you here. Your mother takes a deep breath, a shaky, quiet inhale that seems to suck all the air out of the room. This is the moment. She is no longer just your mother, the one who sings you lullabies and tells you stories. She has become an instrument of tradition, a priestess performing a sacred, terrible duty. Her face is pale. Her lips are thin, tight-lipped. This is the part of the story that is almost impossible to comprehend from a modern perspective. The pain is inflicted by the person you trust the most. She takes your foot in both hands, positioning her thumbs on the sole, just behind your toes. She instructs you to look at your grandmother, to focus on her face. Your grandmother stares back, her expression stern, but you see a flicker of something in her old, clouded eyes. Is it pity, or just a memory of her own pain? Decades ago you tried to pull your foot back, a reflexive, panicked instinct. Your aunt, who has been standing silently in the corner, moves forward and places her hands firmly on your knees, holding you still. You are trapped. It is for your own good. Your mother whispers. The words almost a prayer. A lifetime of honor for a moment of pain. And then she begins to bend. It's not a sudden, violent act. It's a slow, deliberate, inexorable pressure. She forces all four of your smaller toes downwards, tucking them under the sole of your foot. You feel a deep, grinding pressure, a sensation of your bones being pushed far beyond their limits. You let out a small whimper, which quickly turns into a cry. The pain is not sharp, not yet. It's a deep, foundational ache, a protest from the very structure of your body. You squeeze your eyes shut, trying to escape into the darkness, but there is no escape. The pain is inside you. Punter, your grandmother says. Her voice is sharp as glass. Your mother continues to apply pressure, her own body straining with the effort. She is not just fighting against your small bones, she is fighting against your body's will to be whole. She is fighting against nature itself. This is the central, brutal fact of foot binding. It wasn't an accident or a side effect. The breaking of the bones was the entire point. The goal was to fold the toes under and then force the heel and the front of the foot together, creating a deep, artificial arch. This was what created the coveted lotus shape. Without the break, the foot could not be sculpted. You start to sob. Deep, gut-wrenching sobs that shake your entire body. The sugar cube you were given falls from your mouth and rolls onto the floor. Through your tears, you look at your mother's face. You see sweat beading on her forehead. You see a tear escape the corner of her eye and trace a path down her cheek. She is crying with you. This is the heartbreaking paradox. She is both the source of your agony and the sharer in your suffering. Her pain is emotional. Yours is physical. But in this room, your pain is intertwined. A bizarre and little-known element of the process involves what was sometimes called a binding stone or a sleeping block. This was often a heavy, smooth rock or a specially carved piece of wood. After the initial binding, the girl would be forced to walk, putting her weight on her feet to hasten the breaking of the arch. At night, to prevent the girl from subconsciously unwrapping the bandages to relieve the pain in her sleep, this heavy object would be placed on top of her feet, or even tied to the bandages, making any movement a source of renewed agony. It was a 24-hour-a-day process of controlled destruction. The rock you saw earlier wasn't for breaking the bones directly, but for ensuring the break was complete and permanent. Your heart begins to sing. It's a nursery rhyme, a simple, cheerful tune about a magpie building a nest. Her voice is wavering and off-key. It's a desperate, pathetic attempt to distract you, to overlay the sound of your own weeping with something. Anything else, it doesn't work. The world has shrunk to the grinding pressure on your foot and the rising tide of pain that is about to crest into a wave. The debate among historians on this topic is not about if it was painful, but about the social mechanisms that normalized such an act between a mother and daughter. Some sociologists theorize about a phenomenon called institutionalized cruelty, where a practice is so deeply embedded in the social structure, so linked to survival and success that individuals, even loving ones, are compelled to participate in it, overriding their natural empathy. They argue that your mother isn't acting as an individual, but as an agent of the entire social system. Her personal feelings are secondary to her societal duty. You, of course, understand none of this. You only understand your mother's hands. The hands that have fed you and comforted you are now the source of an agony you didn't know could exist. The love and the pain are coming from the same place, and the confusion is as overwhelming as the physical torment. You are waiting for the snap. And then it happens. It's not one sound, but a series of them. A sickening symphony of small, wet cracks, tug, crunch, snap. It's the sound of your metatarsals, the long bones that connect your ankle to your toes, giving way. It's the sound of cartilage tearing, of ligaments being stretched to their breaking point. It's a sound you feel more than you hear, a deep, internal vibration of destruction that travels up your leg and explodes in your brain as a flash of white-hot, blinding pain. The scream that tears itself from your throat is not a child's cry. It is a raw, primal sound of pure agony. It is the sound of your body screaming its own violation. All pretense of bravery, of being a good daughter, is gone, burned away by the sheer, overwhelming force of the pain. You thrash against your aunt's grip, but she holds you fast. Your world dissolves into a red haze of torment. Your mother doesn't stop. The breaking is the goal. Now that the bones are broken, they are malleable. They can be reshaped. She works quickly, almost frantically, her face a grim mask of concentration. She takes the first long strip of cotton bandage, which has been soaked in the alum water, and begins to wrap. This is the most crucial part of the process. The part that will define the shape of your foot for the rest of your life. The wrapping is a specific, highly refined technique passed down through generations of women. First, she pulls the bandage tightly around your broken toes, yanking them down and pressing them flat against the sole of your foot. The pain intensifies, a sharp, grinding misery as the fractured bone ends grate against each other. Then, she takes the cloth and winds it in a figure-8 pattern. She loops it around your toes, then pulls it with all her strength around the back of your heel, forcing the front and back of your foot together like a closing book. The goal is to create an unnaturally high, deep arch. You feel your foot being bent into a shape it was never meant to hold. The broken arch collapsing inward. With each loop of the bandage, she pulls tighter, her knuckles white with the effort. The cloth is a vice, a tourniquet of pain, squeezing the very life out of your foot. You can feel the blood flow being cut off, a tingling numbness beginning to compete with the searing agony of the broken bones. She wraps and wraps, layer upon layer, until your foot is no longer a foot. It is a tight, hard cocoon of white cloth. When she is satisfied with the tension and the shape, she takes her needle and thread. She begins to sew the end of the bandage directly to the other layers, stitching it shut so that it cannot possibly come undone. Each push of the needle through the thick layers of cloth sends a jolt of fresh pain through you. She makes dozens of tiny, neat stitches. It is a work of terrible, meticulous craftsmanship. Here, we encounter a chilling bit of historical trivia that highlights the extremity of this practice. What happened to the big toe while the 4 smaller toes were broken and folded underneath? The big toe was left pointing forward. It was considered the aesthetic focal point of the bound foot, and its upward tilting angle was meant to create a delicate, crescent moon shape. However, in the pursuit of an even smaller, more perfect foot, some mothers would intentionally create a deep gash between the heel and the ball of the foot. The belief was that as this wound healed and scarred over, the scar tissue would contract, pulling the 2 ends of the foot even closer together, permanently shortening its length by another precious fraction of an inch. Once the first foot is a mummified bundle, there is no rest. Your mother simply moves her tool to your other side. You see her pick up your left foot, and a new wave of terror and despair washes over you. You beg, you plead, you promise to be good, promise to do anything, if she will just stop. Please, no more, please, no more. But your words are meaningless. They are just sounds against the unyielding wall of tradition. Your grandmother's grip on your shoulder tightens. Hush, child, we are only halfway done. The process is repeated, every agonizing step. The slow, crushing pressure, the sickening crunch of bone, the scream that you no longer have the strength to fully produce, the impossibly tight trapping, the finality of the stitches. By the time she is finished, you are limp with exhaustion and pain. Your voice a hoarse rasp. Both of your feet are now identical, tight, white parcels of agony. They don't feel like a part of you anymore. They are alien things. Sources of a pain so immense it has become your entire reality. Historians continue to debate the regional variations of the practice. Was the golden Lotus standard of 3 inches a universal ideal? Or did it vary significantly by province, social class, and even by clan? Evidence suggests that while the 3-inch foot was the ultimate symbol of elite status, a silver lotus for inches, or even an iron lotus 5 inches or more was more common. especially among families who couldn't afford complete lifelong immobility for their daughters. The shape you are being forced into is not just a matter of beauty, but a declaration of your family's ambition. They are aiming for gold. Your 2 feet, now encased in their tight, white prisons, are laid gently on a pillow. They throb with a deep, relentless rhythm, a pulsing beat of pure pain that syncs with your own frantic heartbeat. The room is quiet now, save for your ragged, shallow breathing. The ritual is over, but the torment has just begun. Your mother wipes her face with the back of her hand. She looks utterly drained, as if she has just fought a battle. She avoids your eyes. She picks up the tools of her work, the knife, the leftover bandages, the rock, and puts them back in the wooden box. The click of the lid is a sound of terrible finality. Your childhood, the one of bone running and jumping, has been locked away in that box too. Now, let's talk about the bandages themselves. These weren't just any strips of cloth. The ideal guojiabu, or binding cloth, was a subject of much discussion and refinement. They were typically made of cotton or sometimes silk, about 2 inches wide and up to 10 feet long. The key was that they had to be strong and inelastic. The goal was compression, not flexibility. Many families had their own specific way of preparing them. Some would dye them with specific herbal concoctions, believing it would aid in the softening of the bones. The cloth becomes your new skin. It is both the instrument of your torture and the vessel of your transformation. In the initial stage, the bandages are a weapon, brutally reshaping your anatomy. Later, they will become a form of armor, holding your fragile, broken feet together, allowing you to walk, however painfully, and ultimately, they will become a symbol. A tidy wrap, clean, and small binding would signify your discipline, your cleanliness, your refinement. A loose or dirty bandage would be a mark of shame, a sign of a lazy or slovenly woman. From this day forward, these strips of silk and cotton will be the most intimate and important items of your wardrobe. Your mother finally looks at you. Her face is a mixture of pity and resolve. She tells you that the first stage is the most important. You are not to touch the bandages. You are not to loosen them, no matter how much they hurt. She explains that for the next 2 days, you must walk. You stare at her, unconfronted. Walk? How could you possibly walk on these 2 bundles of broken bones and searing pain? She and your aunt lift you to your feet. The moment your weight touches the floor, a fresh explosion of agony rips through you. It's 1,000 sharp needles stabbing into the soles of your feet. The broken bones grind against each other with an audible crunch. You collapse, screaming, but they pull you back up. You must, your mother says, her voice hard. Walking makes the bones set correctly. It forces the arch to break completely. If you do not walk now, all this pain will be for nothing. This is one of the most brutal aspects of the tradition. The girl was forced to walk on her freshly broken feet. This wasn't just cruelty for cruelty's sake, it had a grim, practical purpose. The weight of the body hastened the destruction of the arch and ensured the foot would heal in the desired compacted shape. You were made to shuffle back and forth across the small room, leaning heavily on your aunt and mother, your tears leaving wet tracks in the dust on the floor. Each step is a fresh wave of nausea and fire. Your world narrows to the next step, and the next, and the next. Let's pause here for a lesser-known piece of information about the bindings. They were language. An experienced matchmaker or a prospective mother-in-law could tell a great deal about a girl just by observing her bindings. The tightness of the wrap, the neatness of the folds, the way the final knot was tied and tucked away, all of these were indicators of a girl's character and her family's diligence. An entire subculture of feminine skill revolved around this single, daily task. A girl who could bind her own feet tightly and neatly was considered disciplined and well-bred. It was a skill taught with the same seriousness as cooking or embroidery. Your older sister comes into the room. She brings you a bowl of thin broth. You are too consumed by pain to even think of eating. She looks at your feet, then at your tear-streaked face. She says nothing, But she takes the cloth used to wipe your face and dips it in cool water, placing it on your forehead. It is a small, silent gesture of solidarity. She has walked this path before you. She knows. Historians are still uncertain about the precise origin of foot binding. There's no single, universally accepted starting point. The most popular story, though likely apocryphal, points to the 10th century court of the southern Tang Emperor Liu. He was said to have been enchanted by a court dancer named Yan Yang, who bound her feet in silk to make them pointed like a new moon and performed a lotus dance on the tips of her toes. The story goes that the other women at court, seeking to imitate her and gain the emperor's favor, began binding their own feet. Whether this tale is true or not, it highlights a key aspect from its very beginning. The practice was associated with elite status, beauty, and the captivation of powerful men. You, in your small, dusty room, are now part of that 1,000-year-old legacy, a legacy of silk and of blood. The first night is a descent into a feverish hell. The pain, which was a sharp, localized agony during the day, now radiates outwards. It climbs up your legs, making them ache with a deep, throbbing pulse. It settles in your hips and back, a constant, grinding misery. Sleep is impossible. It's a distant country you cannot reach. Every time you begin to drift off, a fresh jolt from your feet pulls you back into the waking nightmare. You lie on the cane, the brick bed still radiating a gentle warmth that does nothing to soothe the fire in your feet. They feel swollen and tight, as if they are about to burst through the bandages. You can feel your own pulse hammering inside them, a frantic, trapped bird beating against the bars of its cage. You whimper and toss, tangling the thin blanket around you. Your mother is sleeping on a mat on the floor beside you. In the dim moonlight filtering through the paper window, you can see that her sleep is not peaceful. She stirs every time you cry out. Sometime in the deep, silent hours before dawn, a new enemy arrives, the fever. It starts as a chill that has nothing to do with the autumn air. It's a deep, internal cold that makes your teeth chatter. You pull the blanket tighter, but you can't get warm. Then, the chill is replaced by a wave of intense heat. Your skin becomes hot and dry to the touch. The room begins to swim. The shadows in the corner seem to deepen and sway, taking on monstrous shapes. Your mother wakes. She feels your forehead, her hand cool against your burning skin. She mutters something under her breath, a prayer, or a curse, and gets up. She comes back with a wet cloth, bathing your face and neck. It provides a moment of relief, but the heat is coming from inside you. It's the fire of infection. This was the most dangerous period. The mainstream historical knowledge about foot binding often focuses on the shape and the pain, but the immediate, life-threatening risk was infection. The breaking of the bones, the immense pressure of the bindings cutting off circulation, and the inevitable chafing and sores created a perfect breeding ground for bacteria. Gangrene was a constant, terrifying possibility. If the infection set into deeply, the flesh of the foot would begin to rot. The toes could, quite literally, fall off. Many girls did not survive this initial stage. Sepsis, or blood poisoning, would overwhelm their small bodies. A successful binding wasn't just one that resulted in a small foot. It was one the girl survived. You drift in and out of a delirious state. Reality blurs. One moment, you are in your room, your mother's worried face hovering over you. The next, you are back in the sunny courtyard, chasing chickens, your feet home and free. You feel the warm dust between your toes. Then you are falling, tumbling into the dark, cruel, and the dream dissolves back into the throbbing pain and the suffocating heat of the fever. You cry out for your father, for your grandfather, but the world of man is sealed off from this feminine chamber of suffering. This is a trial to be endured by women, overseen by women. Here we find a truly bizarre and grim bit of folk medicine associated with the process. Some manuals on oral traditions suggested that a certain amount of putrefaction was not only expected, but desirable. The phrase Royal Xiao, Sulandao Ruo Yao Xiao, Zul and I translate roughly to if you want it to be small, it must rot. The horrifying logic was that if the flesh became necrotic and sloughed off, the foot would naturally become smaller and more slender. So a mother would be anxiously watching for signs of infection. Caught in a terrible paradox, too little infection, and the foot might not achieve the desired delicacy. Too much, and she could lose her daughter. She would be carefully monitoring the smell, the discharge, and the color, walking a razor's edge between aesthetic perfection and death. Your grandmother comes in, her face grim. She and your mother unwrap a small section of the bandages. You cry out as the cloth, stuck fast with dried blood and fluid, pulls at your raw skin. They examine the foot. The skin is angry and red, swollen and hot. Your grandmother presses a finger into the top of your foot, and the indentation remains for a few seconds. A sign of severe edema. They whisper to each other. Their words are blur you can't understand. They re-wrap the binding, even tighter this time, to try and squeeze out the swelling and fluid. The pain is so immense you black out for a moment. The historical debate here revolves around the actual mortality rates. It's an almost impossible number for historians to pin down. Family records were private, and the death of a young daughter during the Lotus ritual might be recorded as being from a fever, or sickness, or simply not recorded at all. Some estimates suggest the mortality rate could have been as high as 10%, meaning 1 in every 10 girls who underwent the process died from its immediate complications. Others argue the figure was lower, but all agree that it was a significant and known risk. Every mother who picked up that first binding cloth knew she was gambling with her daughter's life. As the sun rises, your fever has not broken. You are weak, barely conscious. Your mother sits by your side, forcing sips of herbal tea between your cracked lips. It tastes bitter. She is humming a lullaby, the same one she used to sing when you were a baby. Her voice is thick with unshed tears. She is fighting for your future, but first, she has to fight for your life. And you, lost in the fog of pain and fever, are fighting too. The fever finally breaks after 3 days that feel like an eternity. You wake one morning drenched in sweat, the sheets clinging to you, but the suffocating heat is gone. You are weak. Your limbs feel heavy as lead, but your mind is clear for the first time since the ordeal began. The pain in your feet has changed. The sharp, searing agony of broken bones has subsided into a deep, permanent, and profound ache. It is the kind of pain you feel in your very marrow. It will be your constant companion from this day forward. Your mother declares that the worst is over. You survived the infection. Now, the real work of shaping your new life begins. It is time to learn to walk again. She unwraps the bindings for the first time since that feverish night. The smell, when the inner layers are exposed, is overwhelming. It's the smell of trapped sweat, stale blood, and dying flesh. The skin on your feet is pale, wrinkled, and raw in places where the cloth has rubbed it away. Your toes, which you can barely see tucked under your sole, are a mottled, purplish color. The shape is already undeniably different. It is no longer a foot. It is a strange, hoof-like appendage. She washes them with excruciating care, using warm water infused with almond herbs. Then she dusts them with powder and begins the wrapping process anew. This will be a ritual you will share for the next few years, until you are old enough to do it yourself, every day, or every few days. The feet will be unwrapped, washed, and rebound, each time a little tighter, coaxing the bones to heal in their unnatural position. Then, you are pulled to your feet. You are given a makeshift crutch, a sturdy bamboo pole, and told to walk. Your first steps are a disaster. You have no balance. The base of your support, the solid foundation of your feet, is gone. You are trying to balance your entire body weight on your heels and the outer edge of these small, painful bundles. You wobble. You sway. You collapse onto the floor in a heap. It is in this wobbly, painful process that you must learn the Lotus Gate. The Yan Bu. This is the mainstream historical point. The walk itself was as much a part of the aesthetic as the smallness of the feet. A woman with bound feet could not walk in a normal heel-to-toe fashion. Instead, she walked with a distinctive, swaying motion. Taking tiny, mincing steps, she had to use her hips and thighs to propel herself, leading to a gait that was seen by male poets and connoisseurs as incredibly alluring, graceful, and suggestive of a delicate vulnerability. They compared it to a young willow swaying in the breeze. For you, it feels anything but graceful. It is clumsy and humiliating. You spend your days shuffling back and forth within the confines of your room. Then the inner courtyard, your world, which once felt so large, has shrunk to the distance you can cover before the pain becomes unbearable. The rooster you used to chase now pecks furiously at your ankles. The lurster you used to leap from now seems as high as a mountain. You fall constantly. Your knees and hands are a collection of scrapes and bruises. Your sister becomes your reluctant teacher. She doesn't offer words of encouragement, but demonstrates. Swing your hips more, she says. Her voice flat. It is the only way to move. Keep your knees bent. She glides across the courtyard. A perfect example of the desired result. Her body sways rhythmically, her arms held slightly out for balance. She looks like a dancer performing a slow, deliberate piece of choreography. You try to imitate her, but your movements are a jerky, pathetic parody. Here's a small, curious detail to encourage girls to practice this difficult walk. Special play activities were devised. One common game involved drawing a lotus flower or a winding path on the ground with chalk. The girls would then have to trace the pattern with their tiny steps, which forced them to learn the precise, controlled movements and swaying motion required. It was a way of turning agonizing physical therapy into a semblance of a game, embedding the aesthetic ideal into their very muscle memory. Your mother watches your progress with an eagle eye. Faster, she'll say, though you feel you can't possibly move any quicker. Smaller steps. You look like a peasant stomping in a field. Her words are harsh, but you are beginning to understand the fear behind them. Your future depends on this performance. A clumsy walk is as bad as a foot that is too large. There is, of course, a historical debate surrounding the interpretation of this walk. Was it truly seen as beautiful by everyone, or was this purely an elite male aesthetic? Some feminist historians argue that the Lotus Gate was nothing more than a visible manifestation of a woman's complete subjugation. Her crippling disability, romanticized as a swaying walk, rendered her utterly dependent on her husband and family. She could not run away. She could not even move from room to room without difficulty. Her walk was a constant, public performance of her own helplessness, which was, in this twisted social logic, considered the pinnacle of feminine charm. Day by day, week by week, you get stronger. Your body adapts. Your leg muscles, your hips, your back, they all learn to compensate for what has been taken from you at your foundation. The falls become less frequent. Your shuffling steps become slightly more fluid. You are slowly, painfully, mastering the art of moving on broken feet. You are learning to sway like a willow. You are learning to dance in your cage. After months of painful practice, the day comes when your mother declares your feet have set. The bones have begun to heal, calcifying into their new, crushed configuration. The shape is now permanent. It is time for your first pair of Lotus shoes. Your mother opens the carved wooden box where she keeps her most precious things. She takes out the tiny, exquisite shoe she was embroidering on the day your world changed. It is even more beautiful than you remembered. The scarlet silk seems to glow in the dim light of the room. The lotus embroidery is perfect. It is a jewel, an object of immense beauty. She presents it to you with a rare, genuine smile. For you, she says. You have earned it. She unwraps your throbbing feet one last time as a child's. The daily ritual of washing and binding has become a grimly familiar routine. But this time is different. After she has powdered your foot, she doesn't reach for the long, plain binding cloths. Instead, she takes the tiny, perfect shoe. It looks impossibly small. You stare at it, then at your own misshapen foot. And you cannot imagine how one will fit into the other. Your mother takes your foot and begins to guide it in. It's a struggle. She has to force it, wiggling and pushing. The shoe is not designed for comfort. It is designed to be a rigid, external mold, a final reinforcement of the binding, forcing your foot to conform to its tiny, pointed shape. The heel of the shoe is stiffened high, pushing your weight forward onto the bent toes. The toe of the shoe curves up in a delicate point. When it's finally on, a fresh wave of pain, sharp and constricting, envelops your foot. It's a different pain from the ache of broken bones. This is the pain of compression, of your flesh and bone being squeezed into an unyielding container. But with the pain comes a strange, new feeling of flicker of pride. You look down at the shoe. It is no longer just a shoe. It is a trophy. It is the proof of your suffering and your endurance. It is beautiful. This is the core historical concept of the Lotus shoe, or Gongzi Bao shoe. It was the centerpiece of the entire custom. The shoes were masterpieces of feminine artistry. Women would spend countless hours embroidering their shoes with intricate patterns of flowers, birds, and auspicious symbols. The shoes were often the only brightly colored, highly decorated part of a woman's attire that would be visible in public. They were a potent symbol of her status, her refinement, and her skill in embroidery. They were, in essence, her calling card. You are given the other shoe, and the process is repeated. Now, you stand, shakily, in your first pair of real shoes. They force you onto your heels, tilting your posture. They make the swaying lotus gait not just an affectation, but a physical necessity. You take a few tentative steps. The hard soles of the shoes clicks softly on the wooden floor. It's a new sound, the sound of your new identity. Now for a fascinating and slightly morbid detail about these shoes. They had a secret life. Because the bound foot was considered the ultimate erotic object, the shoes themselves took on an intense symbolic power. A particularly famous and bizarre tradition was the wine cup shoe. At boisterous parties, a man might ask a woman to remove her shoe. He would then drink wine directly from it. This was considered an act of great intimacy and connoisseurship. The shoe, tiny, ornate, and bearing the faint scent of the woman's perfumed foot powder, became a vessel for a strange and highly ritualized form of flirtation. You are not thinking about wine cups. You are thinking about the courtyard. Your mother opens the door, and for the first time in months, you step out into the full light of day wearing your new identity. Your aunt and grandmother are there. They look down at your feet, at the brilliant red shoes peeking out from under the hem of your trousers. They nod in approval. Your grandmother, who was so stern, lets out a small, satisfied grunt. "Good," she says, like a proper lady. Your older sister watches you take your first few public, swaying steps. She gives you a small, knowing smile. It is a smile of welcome, of initiation. You are no longer a wild, running child. You have joined the society of women. You have passed the test. You have been broken and remade. The historical debate on this point centers on female agency. Were women like your mother and grandmother simply victims and perpetrators of a patriarchal system, or did they create a rich, complex subculture around foot binding that gave them a measure of power and artistic expression? The creation of the shoes is a key piece of this puzzle. Some scholars argue that in a world where women had no public voice, the exquisite craftsmanship of their shoes became their art form, their language, their way of competing and communicating status and skill among themselves. The shoe was a prison, yes, but it was a prison they decorated with the full force of their creativity. As you look down at the beautiful, painful objects on your feet, you are standing at the very intersection of that debate. The beautiful, jewel-like shoes hide a grim reality. They are the public face of a private, lifelong, and often unpleasant maintenance routine. The pride you feel when you display your tiny, swaying feet is paid for every single day in pain and meticulous, tedious labor. A few days after you receive your first pair of shoes, your mother sits you down for a new lesson. It's time for you to learn how to care for your own feet. A woman's elegance is not just in the smallness of her feet, she tells you, her voice serious, but in their cleanliness. No one wants a wife with stinking, rotten lotuses. She helps you remove the tight shoes. A moment of brief, sweet relief. Then comes the unwrapping of the binding cloths. As the layers come off, the smell hits you. It's the same smell of stale sweat and confined flesh from the healing process. But now it is your permanent reality. Your feet, without their bindings, are strange, vulnerable things. They are pale and soft in some places, colored and thick, hard calluses in others. The toes, permanently folded under the sole, are cramped and distorted. Your toenails, which can't be cut normally, have a tendency to grow into the flesh of your sole, a constant source of potential pain and infection. The washing process is a daily ordeal. You soak your feet in a basin of hot water, as hot as you can stand it. The water is fortified with alum, which acts as an astringent to tighten the skin and, crucially, to control the odor. Sometimes other ingredients are added: herbs, tree leaves, even, according to some texts, urine, all believed to have medicinal properties to prevent the flesh from decaying. You must scrub. You scrub between the folded toes, a space that never sees the light of day, where fungus and bacteria can thrive. You scrub the deep, artificial cleft in your sole, the crevice created by bending your foot in half. This area is the most prone to infection and sores. Any small cut or blister, if left unattended, can fester in the hot, airless confinement of the bindings. You learn to probe these hidden folds with your fingers, checking for any sign of trouble. After the washing, the drying is just as important. Every last drop of moisture must be eliminated. You put them dry with a cloth, then often sit with your feet exposed to the air or near a warm brazier for a long time. Then comes the powder. You dust your feet liberally with alum powder or perfumed talc. This is for fragrance, but more importantly, to keep the skin dry and prevent chafing. Then, you must bind them again. This is a skill you must master. You take the long, clean strip of cloth and begin the figure-8 wrap, just as your mother did. But now, it's your own hands pulling the cloth tight, securing your own prison. You must pull with all your strength. A loose binding is a sign of weakness, of laziness. It also allows the bones to shift, which is excruciatingly painful. The binding must be as tight as a second skin, a rigid support system. Finally, you stitch the ends shut. Only then, once the foot is a hard, tight bundle again, can you squeeze it back into the beautiful, unforgiving shoe. This entire process in wrapping, washing, scrubbing, drying, powdering, re-wrapping can take an hour or more, every single day. It is a hidden tax on your life. This is the mainstream historical reality that is often glossed over in the romantic poems. The golden lotus was not a static object of beauty, it was a high-maintenance, fragile, and often foul-smelling medical condition that required constant, diligent care. Now for a peculiar and rather unpleasant little-known fact. One of the most common and persistent problems for women with bound feet was the simple act of cutting their toenails. The nails on the four folded under toes didn't stop growing. They would curl inward, digging into the soft flesh of the sole. If not meticulously trimmed, they could cause deep, painful wounds and infections. A woman had to use special small knives or scissors to get into the cramped, tight fold of her toes. It was a delicate, painful, and bloody procedure. Many older women with failing eyesight or unsteady hands suffered terribly from this one. Small, hidden consequence of the practice. You are only a child, but you must learn this discipline. If you shirk your duty, the consequences are swift. An infection can bloom overnight, turning the deep ache into a raging fire. Your mother inspects your work. She'll check the tightness of your wrap, the neatness of your stitches. She is not just your mother anymore. She is your drill sergeant in the art of feminine perfection. The historical debate around this aspect touches on the concept of feminine spaces and hidden knowledge. This daily ritual was part of a world of knowledge transmitted exclusively from mother to daughter, from woman to woman. Men were not privy to it. They saw the beautiful shoe and the swaying gait. They were shielded from the smell, the shores, the blood, and the endless, tedious labor that made it all possible. Some historians argue that this secret, shared experience of suffering and maintenance created a powerful, hidden bond among women, a culture of mutual support and shared identity that was invisible to the patriarchal world. Others argue it was simply another layer of the prism, a set of secret chores to go along with the public disability. As you meticulously wrap the binding cloth, pulling it until your knuckles are white, you are practicing a secret art, a legacy of hidden pain passed down through 1,000 years of women. You are now 10 years old. The constant, deep ache in your feet has become the normal background noise of your life. You have mastered the swaying walk. You can embroider a passable lotus flower onto a new pair of shoes. You have, by the standards of your world, been successfully sculpted. And now, it is time for your first inspection. The matchmaker arrives on a crisp autumn afternoon. She is not a warm, friendly woman. She is a businesswoman, and you are the product she has come to evaluate. Her name is Mrs. Wayne, and she carries herself with an air of immense importance. Her own feet are exceptionally small, and she walks with the exaggerated, rolling gait of a connoisseur. She is the gatekeeper to your future, the one who will determine your value on the marriage market. You are brought into the formal receiving room, a place you rarely enter. Your father and grandfather are there, a rare occurrence, but they are silent observers. This is a transaction between women. You are dressed in your finest clothes, a pale pink silk tunic and trousers. Your hair is neatly combed. You keep your eyes lowered, as you have been taught. It is a sign of modesty and good breeding. Mrs. Wang doesn't waste time with pleasantries. She sips her tea, her sharp eyes scanning you from head to toe. She asks your mother about your temperament, your skills in sewing and cooking. But this is all a preamble. Everyone in the room knows what she is really here for. Let me see them, she says, her voice flat and commanding. Your mother gives you a small, encouraging nod. You sit on a stool, and your mother kneels before you. With deliberate, almost ceremonial slowness, she removes your shoe. The room is silent. All eyes are on your foot. Mrs. Wang leans forward, her expression intense, like a jeweler examining a diamond. She does not ask to see the bare foot. That would be improper. The bound foot, encased in its tight, clean bindings, is what is judged. The mainstream historical point here is that the foot itself was considered intensely private and erotic, not to be seen by anyone but a husband, and sometimes not even then. The inspection focused on the clothed and bound foot, the size, the shape, the neatness of the wrap, the quality of the shoe. This was the public presentation of your lifelong ordeal. Mrs. Wang gestures with a flick of her fingers. Bring the measure. Your father produces a special ruler, often made of bamboo or ivory, marked with the traditional Chinese inches. The measurement is the moment of truth. A 3-inch foot of golden lotus is the highest prize. 4 inches is a silver lotus. Acceptable, but less prestigious. Anything over that is an iron lotus, and a severe disappointment. Your mother holds the ruler against the length of your bound foot, from the tip of the big toe to the back of the heel. There is a collective holding of breath. Mrs. Wang squints. 3 1/4, she announces. Not perfect, but very, very good. A high-grade silver, bordering on gold. Your mother lets out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. A wave of relief washes over her face. But the inspection isn't over. This is only one component. The shape is just as important, Mrs. Wang isn't satisfied with the ruler. She reaches out and, to your shop, takes your bound foot in her own hands. Her touch is not gentle. It is the touch of a professional appraiser. She squeezes it, feeling the firmness of the binding. She runs her thumb along the curve of the arch, judging its depth. She feels the pointedness of the toe. Slender, she murmurs, a note of approval in her voice. A good crescent shape. The binding is tight. The girl is disciplined. This hands-on inspection leads us to a strange and specific piece of trivia. The classification of bound feet went far beyond just golden, silver, iron. True connoisseurs had a whole vocabulary to describe the subtle nuances of a perfectly bound foot. They spoke of shapes like the new moon, the graceful arch, the bamboo shoot, and the water chestnut. There were dozens of these poetic, yet oddly clinical, descriptors. A matchmaker like Mrs. Wang would have this entire taxonomy memorized. She wasn't just measuring your foot, she was classifying it, sorting it into a complex hierarchy of desirability. Finally, she lets go. She sits back, takes another sip of tea, and looks at your father. The family of Magistrate Yu is looking for a second wife for their eldest son, she says. They are a very distinguished family. They will insist on a girl of refinement. This, she gestures towards you, is promising. The tension in the room breaks. Your father smiles. Your mother gives your shoulder a proud squeeze. You have passed. Your years of pain, the broken bones, the endless washing and binding, it has all been validated in this single, humiliating, yet triumphant moment. You have been weighed, measured, and not found wanting. The historical debate here is a poignant one. Did the girls and women themselves internalize these standards? The answer, overwhelmingly, appears to be yes. While the system was undeniably patriarchal, women became its most ardent enforcers and participants. A woman with beautifully small feet often took immense pride in them. It was her greatest accomplishment, a source of lifelong status and self-esteem. Historians debate whether this pride was a form of false consciousness and acceptance of one's own oppression, or a strategic adaptation, a way for women to find honor and agency within an incredibly restrictive system. As you sit there, feeling a flush of pride mixed with the familiar throb of pain, you are a living testament to that complex reality. The approval of the matchmaker feels like a victory, and for the first time, you begin to see your mangled feet not as a source of pain, but as the key to your entire future. The matchmaker's approval solidifies your future. You are now officially a desirable commodity on the marriage market, but it also solidifies the boundaries of your world. As you transition from a girl into a young woman, your life becomes increasingly confined. Your universe, which once stretched to the edges of the courtyard, now shrinks to the size of the women's quarters, the NERC, or inner apartments. Your inability to walk easily or for long distances is no longer just a physical handicap, it becomes a marker of your high status. The mainstream historical reality for an upper-class woman was a life of cultivated immobility. The fact that you couldn't walk to the market, labor in the fields, or even move freely around the family compound was a powerful, visible symbol of your family's wealth. It meant they could afford servants to do everything for you. Your helplessness was their status symbol. Your days fall into a quiet, predictable rhythm, governed by indoor pursuits. You spend hours upon hours with your embroidery. You sit on a low stool by the window, the best light you can get, with a silk panel stretched taut on a wooden frame. You practice your stitches, creating elaborate scenes of peonies, phoenixes, and mandarin ducks, all symbols of love and happy marriage. Your needle becomes your primary tool, your way of expressing creativity and skill within your gilded cage. You learn to play the cuckoo and a 7-string zither. Its music is soft and melancholic, considered appropriate for a refined lady. Your fingers, which are nimble and strong from your needlework, learn to pluck the strings to create haunting, gentle melodies that fill the quiet afternoons. The music is beautiful, but it's a beauty born of stillness. You can't dance to it. You can only sit and play, a stationary source of auditory pleasure for the household. Your world is a sensory one, but it's a world of mere senses. You hear the boisterous laughter of the men in the front courtyard, but you rarely see them. You smell the delicious, complex aromas of food being prepared in the kitchen, but you are served your meals on a tray in your room. You can look out your window and see the seasons change, the ginkgo tree turning from green to brilliant gold, the first snowflakes dusting the roof tiles, but you cannot walk out to feel the crisp autumn air or the cold snow on your skin. Your life is lived at a remove, once separated from the raw experiences of the world. This brings us to a strange and poignant piece of trivia: the invention of a kind of Victorian wheelchair in China. For wealthy women whose feet were so small or so painfully bound that even the Lotus gate was a struggle. Families would sometimes have special, ornate sedan chairs built not for outdoor travel, but for moving within the house. A lady might be carried by 2 servants from her bedroom to the garden pavilion, a journey of perhaps 100 feet. It was the ultimate display of conspicuous helplessness, a mobile throne that underscored her complete inability to navigate her own home. Your older sister, already married and living in another province, comes to visit. She has changed. She is more poised, more confident. She brings her own infant son. You watch with a mix of envy and curiosity as she manages her life. She still sways when she walks, of course, but she does it with an air of command. She directs the servants, oversees the household accounts, and commands the respect of everyone. She shows you that while your physical world has shrunk, the world of domestic power, the only world available to you, has its own complex rules and hierarchies. And in this world, she is a queen. A woman's strength isn't in her legs, she tells you. It's in her management of the home. Never forget that. The historical debate here is centered on the concept of the inner quarters as a space of female power. Was the confinement of women a simple act of patriarchal oppression, or did it inadvertently create a unique, autonomous female society? A woman's world where they could exercise significant authority, free from direct male interference. Some historians argue that the matriarch of a large household, the grandmother, or the first wife, wielded immense power, controlling the family's finances, arranging marriages, and dictating the lives of daughters-in-law, and servants. Her bound feet guaranteed she would always be present, the stationary center of the family's domestic universe. Her physical prison was, in a strange way, the source of her authority. You are not a matriarch yet. You are a girl waiting for your marriage to be finalized, waiting to be moved from your father's inner quarters to your husband's. Your life is a long, quiet period of preparation. You perfect your embroidery. You practice your music. You learn the complex etiquette of managing servants. You do all of this from a seated position. You look at your own beautiful, tiny shoes. They are the reason for this life. They are the key that has locked you into this quiet, refined, and suffocatingly small world. You have a roof over your head, silk on your skin, and food in your bowl. You have everything a girl could want, except the freedom to walk away from it all. Years pass. The sharp, daily agony of your feet has mellowed into a familiar, chronic ache. A dull throb that is as much a part of you as the beat of your own heart. You are a young woman now, perhaps 16. Your marriage has been arranged. Soon, you will leave your family's home for your husband's, and a strange transformation has taken place in your mind. A subtle alchemy of psychology that turns pain into pride. You no longer remember the feeling of running. The memory of your strong, whole feet is a ghost, a half-forgotten dream. Your current reality is the sway of your hips, the click of your tiny shoes on the floor, the careful negotiation of every single step. And you have come to embrace it. When you gather with your female cousins and the other young women of the household, the conversation inevitably turns to feet. It's a point of comparison, of competition, and of shared identity. You discreetly compare the size of your shoes. You admire the intricacy of a friend's embroidery. You might even, in the privacy of the women's quarters, Lift the hem of your trousers slightly to compare the shape and slenderness of your bound ankles. Having smaller feet than your cousin gives you a genuine sense of superiority. It's a feeling of accomplishment. You endured the pain. You are disciplined in your daily binding. Your smallness is a testament to your virtue and your family status. The pain you suffered is no longer a trauma. It is the price you paid for this victory. This international of pain as a mark of honor is the central, powerful psychological mechanism that allowed this practice to persist for 1,000 years. It wasn't just men imposing it on women, it was women imposing it on themselves and each other, and taking deep, genuine pride in the results. You look with a mixture of pity and disdain at the serving girls in your household. They are big-footed girls. They can run and squat and carry heavy trays with an ease you can't imagine. But to you, they look clumsy, coarse, and unfeminine. Their natural, healthy feet are, to your conditioned eyes, a mark of their low birth and peasant status. You see their freedom of movement not as a strength, but as a sign that they are destined for a life of labor. Your own confinement, by contrast, feels like a badge of honor. This leads to a truly strange encounter. It turns to a piece of historical trivia. Footbinding was sometimes described in Taoist and esoteric texts as a form of female alchemy or inner cultivation. The theory was that the pain and restraint of the practice helped a woman to cultivate yin energy, the feminine principle of quiet, stillness, and introspection. By crippling her physical mobility, it was believed she could better cultivate her inner spiritual and energetic life. The blood and key life force that would have gone to her strong, active legs and feet were instead conserved, refined, and directed inward, making her more pure, more fertile, and more spiritually potent. It's a classic example of creating a complex philosophical justification for a brutal physical reality. You now take pleasure in the rituals you once dreaded. You find a quiet satisfaction in the daily washing and binding of your feet. It is a moment of self-care, of discipline. You take pride in the tightness of your wrap, the neatness of your stitches. You experiment with different perfumed powders. Your collection of Lotus shoes, each pair more exquisitely embroidered than the last, is your most prized possession. They are your art, your diary, your identity, all rolled into one. You hear stories, whispers from the matchmaker, about girls whose bindings were not successful, girls whose feet became permanently infected, who had to have toes amputated, or whose feet were still considered too large. You feel a sense of smug satisfaction. Their failure highlights your success. The system is built on this competition. It pits woman against woman in a lifelong contest of beauty defined by mutilation. The historical debate here focuses on the psychological concept of identification with the aggressor. It's a defense mechanism where a victim of abuse or trauma begins to adopt the values and behaviors of their tormentor. Some feminist scholars apply this lens to footbinding. A young girl is brutalized by her mother and the female elders in her family. To resolve the intense psychological conflict of being harmed by those she loves and depends on, she stops seeing them as aggressors and instead embraces the system they represent. She internalizes its values so completely that she becomes a willing participant in, eventually, an enforcer of the tradition herself on the next generation. It's a powerful theory that helps explain how a cycle of pain could be perpetuated by its own victims. As you sit by the window, putting the final stitch on a new pair of wedding shoes made of the finest red silk and embroidered with a dragon and a phoenix, you are not thinking of yourself as a victim. You are thinking of your future husband. You have been told he is a scholar, a man of great refinement. You imagine him seeing your feet for the first time. You imagine his admiration, his praise, and in that imagined moment, all the pain, all the years of confinement, seem worthwhile. You have successfully transformed your agony into your greatest asset. You are proud of your cage. You are married. You have moved from your childhood home to the grand, sprawling estate of your husband's family. You are a wife now, a daughter-in-law, and your status within this new family is, for the moment, fragile. Your primary value, the asset that was advertised by the matchmaker, is your refinement, and the most visible evidence of that refinement is your feet. But you quickly learn that even within the seemingly uniform world of bound feet, there exists a complex and brutal hierarchy. Your mother-in-law is the undisputed matriarch of the household. Her own feet are impossibly small, true 3-inch golden lotuses from a bygone era of stricter standards. She carries herself with an air of absolute authority, her slow, swaying walk a constant reminder of her superior breeding. She inspects your feet not with the professional curiosity of the matchmaker, but with the critical eye of a rival. She notes that your feet, at 1/4 of an inch over the golden standard, are merely silver lotuses. It is an unspoken, but clearly registered, point against you. You feel this hierarchy in subtle ways every day when the women of the family gather. Your mother-in-law will compliment the embroidery on your shoes, but then might make a passing comment about how modern standards have become so lax. It's a polite, veiled insult. You are constantly aware that your silver status is a mark of being second best. This fuels a fierce ambition within you. You can't change the size of your feet now, but you can ensure every other aspect of your presentation is flawless. Your bindings are always impeccably tight and clean. Your shoes are the most beautifully embroidered in the household. You perfect your graceful, swaying walk. You are in a constant, silent competition. This leads us to a fascinating and little-known subcategory within this hierarchy: the overwrapped foot. In their desperate ambition to achieve a smaller size, some mothers would bind their daughters' feet with such extreme and unrelenting pressure that it would cause severe, debilitating complications beyond the norm. This could lead to a foot that was, in fact, smaller than 3 inches, but was gnawed, discolored, and prone to constant, weeping infections, while it might technically meet the size requirement. This overwrapped or spoiled lotus was considered a failure. It was seen as a sign of a mother's crude, unsophisticated ambition, and it would be sniffed out and scorned by a discerning eye like your mother-in-law's. The ideal was not just smallness, but a healthy, well-maintained smallness, the truly paradoxical concept. One afternoon, a cousin of your husband's visits from the countryside. She is a cheerful, robust young woman. Her family is less affluent, and it shows. When you are all gathered, you can't help but notice the size of her shoes. They are clumsy, almost boat-like compared to yours. She is clearly an iron lotus. Your mother-in-law is polite to her, but her disdain is palpable. Later, you overhear her muttering to another daughter-in-law. She walks like a duck. How can she expect to find a decent husband with feet like that? You look at your own delicate, scarlet shoes and feel a surge of pride and relief. You may be silver, but you are leagues above iron. The historical debate here is about the class dimension of the practice. While footbinding is often presented as a universal Chinese custom, it was, for most of its history, an elite practice. It was a way for the upper classes to distinguish themselves from the laboring masses. However, over the centuries, the practice began to trickle down the social ladder. Ambitious peasant families who managed to acquire a little wealth would bind their daughters' feet as a way to buy their way into a higher social class. It was a form of aspirational self-mutilation. This often created tension. Elite women, like your mother-in-law, were fiercely protective of their status and looked down on these upstarts whose bindings they deemed coarse and unrefined. The hierarchy of lotus feet was, in essence, a microcosm of the entire Chinese class structure. You learn to navigate this complex world. You are deferential to your mother-in-law. You are gracious, but subtly superior, to those with larger feet. You understand that your body, specifically this small part of it, is a battlefield of status, ambition, and feminine power. The pain in your feet is a constant reminder of the price of entry into this world. And the hierarchy: golden, silver, iron is the ladder you must spend the rest of your life climbing, or at least, not falling from. Your husband is a scholar, a man of letters and refined tastes. Just as the matchmaker promised, he is often preoccupied with his books, his poetry, and gatherings with his male friends. Your interactions are formal and infrequent, governed by strict etiquette, but you are acutely aware of his gaze. You know that you, and especially your feet, are objects of his aesthetic appreciation, much like a beautiful piece of jade or a rare porcelain vase. He never speaks of your feet directly. It would be considered crass and unseemly. Instead, he speaks in metaphor and allusion. One evening, as you are helping him grinding, he unrolls a scroll and reads a poem aloud. It's by a famous Tang Dynasty poet, celebrating the intoxicating beauty of a woman's lotus steps as she walks behind a beaded curtain. He looks at you, a soft, appreciative smile on his face, and you understand. He is complimenting you. He is praising your walk, your refinement, your feet. This is the central historical truth of how the practice was sustained from the male side through a relentless campaign of cultural romanticization. For 1,000 years, the educated male elite poets, artists, and scholars wrote endlessly about the beauty and erotic appeal of bound feet. They created a vast body of literature and art that transformed a painful, crippling disability into the ultimate symbol of feminine allure. They praised the lotus gait, the tiny shoes, the tantalizing glimpse of a small, red-tipped shoe beneath a silk skirt. They created the demand that fueled the entire brutal supply chain. You are living within this fantasy. Your husband doesn't see the daily, tedious reality of your foot care. He doesn't smell the alum water. He doesn't know about the calluses or the risk of inground nails. He sees the artful, public performance, the swaying walk, the exquisite shoes, the cultivated helplessness. He has fallen in love not with you, the living, breathing woman, but with an ideal, an archetype constructed by centuries of male imagination. And your role is to embody that ideal as perfectly as possible. This brings us to a specific and rather peculiar genre of literature that became popular in the Qing Dynasty: Lotus manuals or Lotus rankings. These weren't medical texts or instructional guides for binding. They were connoisseurs' handbooks, written by and for men, that meticulously ranked and categorized every conceivable aspect of the bound foot. One famous text, the Shi Anglian Ping Yi Song Lian Ping Zao, or Commentaries on the Fragrant Lotus, ranks feet on 18 different qualities, including shape, poise, softness, fragrance, and even the sound the shoes make. It's an obsessive, fetishistic taxonomy that reduces a woman's body part to a set of abstract aesthetic principles. For example, the ideal foot was not just small, but also plump, and slender. The author of this manual even suggests that the ideal foot should have a particular, faint fragrance, which is why women used perfumed powders. Your husband has one of these manuals in his study. You've seen him reading it. You are both the subject of this literature and completely excluded from it. It is a world of men talking to other men about the ideal qualities of women's bodies. And you, and all the women around you, are silently, painfully striving to meet the criteria laid out in these books you will never be allowed to read. You see this romanticization in the art that decorates your new home. There are scrolls on the walls depicting graceful, slender court ladies, their tiny feet always peeking out from their robes. There are painted fans showing romantic scenes in a garden, where the woman is always depicted as small, delicate, and stationary, while the man stands over her, active and admiring. The entire visual culture reinforces the same message: a beautiful woman is a disabled woman. The historical debate on this subject is intense. To what extent was this male aesthetic a genuine appreciation of beauty? And to what extent was it a conscious or subconscious desire for control? Many scholars argue that the eroticization of helplessness was the key. A woman who could not walk properly could not be independent. She was physically dependent on her husband and family, which in a deeply patriarchal society was seen as a desirable state. Her bound feet were a literal and symbolic guarantee of her chastity and fidelity. She simply could not run astray. So when a poet praised her willow-like grace, was he appreciating her beauty, or was he celebrating her chains? The debate continues. But It's impossible to separate the aesthetic from the politics of control. You live in this gilded cage of poetry and art. You are praised for your weakness, celebrated for your confinement. You have been taught to see your husband's aesthetic appreciation as a form of love, and perhaps, in a way, it is. But it's a love directed at a fantasy, a carefully constructed image, the real you, the girl who once ran in the sun. The woman who endures a daily regimen of painful maintenance remains invisible, hidden behind the beautiful, crippling ideal. Life inside the walls of your husband's grand home is all-consuming. The world of bound feet, with its intricate rules and hierarchies, seems like the entire universe, but even in your cloistered existence, whispers and stories from the outside world manage to filter in. And you begin to learn a surprising fact: not everyone does this. There are the women, other Chinese women, who walk on natural, healthy feet. Your first encounter with this reality comes through a new servant girl hired in your household. She is from a Hakka family, a subgroup of the Han Chinese people known for their distinct culture and migratory history. The girl is strong, efficient, and walks with a firm, confident stride that you find both fascinating and jarring. Her feet, clad in simple cloth shoes, are large and natural. She can carry heavy buckets of water without stumbling, and she squats for hours to scrub the floors. You overhear the other daughters-in-law whispering about her. "Look at those boat feet," one sneers. "It's unnatural for a woman." They treat her as a curious anomaly, something less than a proper woman. But you also notice a grudging respect for her physical competence. When a heavy piece of furniture needs to be moved, it is the big-footed Hakka girl they call for. Then you learn of an even more powerful group of women who reject the practice the Manchus. Your husband's family, like all subjects of the Qing dynasty, lives under the rule of the Manchu people, who conquered China in the 17th century. The Manchu emperors are acutely aware that footbinding is a Han Chinese custom. They see it as a symbol of the decadent self-culture they conquered. Your husband tells you, with a hint of disapproval, that the Manchu court has repeatedly issued edicts banning footbinding. The very first Manchu emperor to rule China, Shun Ziyechai, tried to outlaw it in the mid-1600s. His successor, the great Kangxi emperor, also issued multiple prohibitions against it. They saw it as barbaric and, more importantly, as a stubborn symbol of Han identity that they wanted to erase. This leads to a wonderful piece of historical trivia that showcases the clash of cultures. Since Manchu women were forbidden from binding their feet, but still wanted to emulate the graceful swaying walk of Han Chinese ladies, they invented a special kind of shoe. These were platform shoes, often called flower pot or horse hoof shoes through a pendiometrics, i.e. they had a high, central pedestal, often 2 to 4 inches tall, in the middle of the sole. Walking on these required a similar kind of careful, swaying motion as walking on bound feet. It was a way for Manchu noble women to achieve the desired aesthetic of the Lotus Gate without actually crippling themselves. It was, in essence, a high fashion hack, a cultural compromise on footwear. You might catch a glimpse of a high-ranking Manchu lady visiting your city, teetering on her tall platform shoes, her natural feet hidden but whole. It's a strange sight, an imitation of your reality. So why, if the emperors themselves forbid it, does the practice continue so fervently in your own Han Chinese family? The historical debate here centers on cultural resistance and identity. For many Han Chinese, footbinding became a powerful, unspoken act of defiance against their Manchu rulers. The Manchus forced Han men to adopt the Manchu hairstyle, the shaved forehead and long queue, as a sign of submission. It was a humiliation. In response, some historians argue, Han families clung even more tightly to the practice of footbinding for their women. It became a secret, intimate symbol of their cultural purity and their refusal to be completely assimilated. While their men were forced to submit outwardly, their women's bodies became the last bastion of Han identity. You are living in this contradiction. Your pain is a political statement. Your crippled feet are a symbol of cultural pride and resistance to an outside power. You look at the hacker servant girl, striding freely across the courtyard. You think of the mansion-noble women, teetering on their clever shoes. Their worlds are so different from yours. They are defined by what they are not you. Their freedom, their wholeness, only serve to reinforce the perceived preciousness and cultural significance of your own sacrifice. The existence of unbound hacker women in mansion nobles is a curiosity, a conversation piece for the ladies in the inner quarters. They are outsiders, but you begin to notice subtler variations of the practice closer to home, even among Han Chinese women. This reveals a more complex, class-based reality than the simple bound versus inbound dichotomy. One of your maids, a young woman named Ping, has bound feet, but they are not like yours. Her shoes are larger, less delicate. Her walk, while not the confident stride of the hacker girl, lacks the pronounced, swaying grace of a true lady. It's a shuffling, slightly clumsy gait. Your mother-in-law refers to women like her as having halfway feet or radish feet, a cruel term for a foot that has been bound, but not to the elite standard of smallness and delicacy. You learn that Ping's family are tenant farmers. They are not wealthy landowners like your family, but they have aspirations. For them, binding their daughter's feet was a major investment, a hope that she might secure a better position in life. Perhaps as a personal maid in a great house like this one, rather than facing a life of hard labor in the fields. This is the mainstream historical reality for a huge segment of the population. For poorer families, the ideal of the completely immobile, ornamental woman was an impossible luxury. They needed their daughters to be able to work, but they also wanted the social status associated with footbinding. The result was a variety of compromises. Many working-class women would bind their feet, but less severely. The process might be started later in childhood, when the bones were harder, resulting in a less extreme shape, or the bindings might be loosened during the day to allow for more mobility for chores, and then tightened at night. This created a spectrum of binding. At one end, you have the golden lotus of the elite, a foot designed for total inactivity. At the other end, you have the unbound foot of the laborer, and in the middle, you have this vast grey area of partially bound, functionally bound, or loosely bound feet. Women like Ping occupied this middle ground. Her feet were a symbol of her family's ambition, but also of their limitations. They were bound just enough to take her out of the fields, but not enough to grant her entry into the true elite. This leads to a little-known and rather pragmatic detail, the concept of the liberated foot for peasant women. In some agricultural communities, it was common for a girl's feet to be bound tightly in her youth to make her a more desirable bride. However, after she was married and had children, especially if her new family needed her labor in the fields, she might be encouraged to let out her bindings. She would gradually loosen the wraps over time. The bones, of course, were permanently broken and deformed, but this loosening could restore a degree of mobility and allow her to perform essential agricultural tasks. Her feet would be larger and less beautiful, but more practical. It was a trade-off between youthful marriageability and mature utility. You see the evidence of this all around you. You notice the woman who sells fabric in the market town. She sways slightly, but she can stand for hours. Her feet are clearly bound, but they are of the iron lotus variety. You see the cook in your own kitchen, who shuffles around on feet that are a compromise between tradition and the physical demands of her job. The historical debate here revolves around economics versus culture. Did footbinding persist for 1,000 years purely because of cultural and aesthetic ideals, or were there underlying economic drivers? Some economic historians argue that footbinding can be seen as a form of conspicuous consumption or conspicuous leisure. To use Thorstein Veblen's terms, a wealthy man proved his status by showing he could afford to have a completely non-productive wife. But this created an economic incentive for everyone else. A farmer might bind his daughter's feet not just for beauty, but because it signaled to potential suitors that his family was on the rise, that they had aspirations beyond mere subsistence farming. It was a costly signal, paid for by the daughter's pain and disability, but one that could potentially yield a huge return in the form of a favorable marriage alliance. You watch Penny as she works. She struggles to carry a heavy tray, her compromised balance making her wobble precariously. You feel a complex mixture of pity and superiority. Her feet are a constant reminder of her in-between status. They lack the rustic strength of the unbound peasant and the ornamental delicacy of the true lady. They are a painful, physical manifestation of striving but not quite arriving. And in the silent, ruthless calculus of your world, that makes her an object of scorn, not sympathy. Your world is saturated with images of the perfect woman, and that woman always has tiny feet. The ideal is not just reinforced by your mother-in-law's critical gaze or your husband's poetry, it's everywhere, codified in the popular culture of your time, serving as a constant, silent instruction manual for femininity. You spend an afternoon with your sisters-in-law, looking through a collection of neon hua, or New Year's pictures. These are brightly colored woodblock prints, mass-produced and sold cheaply, that families would paste on their walls for good luck and decoration. They are the television, the magazines, the internet of your era. They depict scenes of prosperity, chubby babies, legendary heroes, and, most frequently, beautiful women. You look closely at these prints. The women are always depicted with the same key features: a pale, oval melon seed face slender, with a wisp body and peeking out from beneath the hem of a luxurious robe, the impossibly small, pointed tip of a red lotus shoe. The foot is often drawn disproportionately small, even for a bound foot, emphasizing its importance. It is the visual shorthand for beauty and virtue. There are no heroines with big feet in these pictures. There are no celebrated beauties who can stand firmly on the ground. The ideal is a beautiful, precarious creature who looks like she might float away, or topple over, at any moment. This is the mainstream historical point. Popular art was a powerful tool for standardizing and disseminating beauty norms. These cheap, ubiquitous prints reached every corner of the empire. From the richest urban mansions to the humblest rural huts, they provided a consistent, easily understandable visual template for what a proper woman should look like. A young girl looking at these pictures would learn, without a single word being spoken, that small feet were an essential component of beauty, as fundamental as a pretty face or fine clothes. Your husband has a collection of more refined art-painted scrolls and illustrated books. The theme is the same, just rendered with more expensive materials and greater skill. You look at a famous set of paintings called Beauties at Leisure. It shows elegant women in a garden, playing music, reading poetry, or admiring flowers. They are all beautiful, serene, and utterly inactive. Their bound feet, encased in exquisite shoes, are always prominently displayed. They are often sitting or leaning gracefully against a railing. They never stand unassisted in the middle of a room. Their posture itself is a story of their physical limitations. The paintings are not just portraits of women, they are portraits of a lifestyle defined by confinement. This brings us to a strange and specific cultural artifact, the so-called erotic art of the late imperial period. These were often illustrated books or hand scrolls, intended for private viewing by male collectors. While some were explicitly pornographic, many focused on a more subtle, fetishistic appreciation of the bound foot. You might find an entire album dedicated to dozens of paintings of nothing but different styles of lotus shoes. Another common scene would depict a man playfully stealing a woman's shoe, or a woman coyly revealing her bound ankle. In these images, the foot is often the most detailed and lovingly rendered part of the woman's body. The face might be generic, but the foot is specific, individual, and the clear focus of the artist's attention. It's a stark illustration of where the cultural fascination truly lay. You will never see these books. Of course, they belong to the secret world of men, but their influence is all around you. The aesthetic they celebrate is the aesthetic you are forced to embody. You are living inside a work of art, a character brought to life from the pages of a book or the surface of a scroll. The historical debate here questions the relationship between art and reality. Did the art simply reflect the existing social practice of footbinding, or did it actively shape and promote it? Most historians now believe the latter is true. By creating such a powerful, pervasive, and romanticized ideal, the art made the practice seem not just normal, but highly desirable. It was aspirational. A woman didn't just bind her feet to please her husband, she bound them to look like the beautiful women in the pictures. The art created a fantasy, and then women were expected to mutilate their bodies to fit into that fantasy. It was a self-perpetuating loop of cultural imagery and physical reality. You look again at the cheap, colorful New Year's print. You see the smiling, doll-like woman with her tiny red shoes. You see her serene expression, her perfect clothes. There is no hint of pain, no suggestion of the daily, unpleasant maintenance. It is a perfect, clean, beautiful lie. And it is the lie that has shaped every aspect of your existence. You smooth down your own silk tunic, adjust the position of your own small feet, and try, as you have been taught your entire life, to become the woman in the picture. Your life is governed by a force far more powerful than any emperor's decree tradition. You know that the Manchu rulers in the Forbidden City in Beijing disapprove of your bound feet. You've heard the stories of their failed attempts to ban the practice. But here, in the courtyards and dinner chambers of your husband's home, the emperor's laws feel distant and irrelevant. The opinion of your mother-in-law carries far more weight than the opinion of the Son of Heaven. This is a crucial historical fact about the late imperial period. The Qing dynasty, for all its power, often struggled to enforce its will at the local level, especially when it came to deeply entrenched social customs. The Manchu emperors issued edicts against footbinding multiple times, starting in the 17th century. The Kangxi emperor's ban was perhaps the most famous. He decreed that any Han Chinese girl born after 1664 was forbidden from binding her feet. Any official whose daughter violated the ban would face severe punishment. But it was a spectacular failure. Han officials would ignore the order, or find ways around it. They would bind their daughters' feet in secret. The social pressure from their own communities to conform to Han customs was far more immediate and powerful than the threat of punishment from a distant Manchu court. The backlash was so strong that the ban was eventually repealed only a few years after it was implemented. It was a rare and stunning defeat for one of China's most powerful emperors. Your husband might grumble about the Manchu authorities and their interference, but he would never dream of applying their laws to his own household. The Manchus understand warfare and horses, he might say. They do not understand civilization and refinement. They want to turn us all into coarse, big-footed barbarians like them. To him, and to most Han elites, footbinding isn't just a custom, it's a cornerstone of their cultural identity, a marker of what separates them from their uncivilized rulers. This resistance leads to a fascinating and slightly comical piece of historical trivia: the inspections and the evasions. During the periods when the ban was technically in effect, local magistrates, under pressure from the central government, would sometimes conduct half-hearted foot inspections. Officials would be sent to check if a prominent family was complying with the law, but these were often a farce. Families would get advance warning and hide their daughters, or they would create special, oversized fake shoes to slip over their daughters' tiny bound feet, giving the appearance of natural feet. The local inspectors, who were also Han Chinese and sympathetic to the custom, would pretend not to notice the girl's strange, swaying walk and tick the box saying the family was compliant. It was a massive, empire-wide conspiracy of passive resistance. You see this attitude reflected in your own home. Your father-in-law is a local official. He serves the Qing government, wears the official robes, and recites the required pieties to the emperor. But he would rather die than allow his granddaughters to grow up with natural feet. To him, it would be a betrayal of his ancestors and his culture. His loyalty to the emperor is political, his loyalty to the tradition of the Golden Lotus is absolute. The historical debate here explores the limits of state power in a pre-modern society. Why did the Qing emperors, who were so successful at imposing other measures like the male cue, fail so utterly with footbinding. Some historians argue it was a matter of public versus private spheres. The cue was a public, visible mark of submission for men. It was impossible to hide. Footbinding, however, belonged to the private, domestic, and feminine sphere. It happened inside the home, within the women's quarters, a world that was largely inaccessible to male government inspectors. The state could control what happened in the streets and the courts, but it couldn't control what a mother did to her daughter in the privacy of her own bedroom. Others argue it was a matter of perceived stakes for the Manchu rulers. The ban on footbinding was about cultural assimilation, but it wasn't essential to their political control. For Han families, however, the stakes felt existential. Footbinding was tied to everything: honor, marriage, status, class, and cultural identity. They were willing to defy the state and risk punishment because they believed that giving up the practice would mean giving up the very essence of their civilization. You are a living symbol of this successful resistance. Every painful step you take is a small victory for Han culture against Manchu rule. You have been taught to see your disability not as a consequence of a harmful tradition, but as an act of cultural preservation. The emperor in his distant palace may have all the armies and all the power, but he cannot reach into your home and unwrap the bindings that hold your feet and your world. Together, the will of your grandmother is stronger than the will of the emperor. You are growing older. You are in your 30s, maybe 40s. You have sons, and you have daughters of your own. Your life is comfortable, secure, and predictable, but your body is beginning to betray you in new ways. The familiar ache in your feet is now being joined by a host of other pains and problems. The invisible, long-term costs of your beautiful feet are coming due. The most constant problem is your balance. It has always been precarious, but as you age, it gets worse. Your leg muscles, which have had to compensate for your lack of stable feet your entire life, are beginning to weaken. A simple, uneven flagstone in the courtyard can send you tumbling. A fall for you is not a minor incident. It's a serious danger. A broken hip would be a death sentence. You find yourself moving even more slowly, more cautiously. Your world's shrinking even further as you avoid any potentially hazardous terrain. This is the most direct and well-documented long-term health consequence of footbinding, a mainstream medical fact. Studies of the last generation of women with bound feet, conducted in the late 20th century, confirmed what was long suspected: they had a dramatically higher risk of falling and suffering fall-related fractures. Their bone density in their hips and spines was often lower, partly because their immobility prevented the kind of weight-bearing exercise that keeps bones strong. Your own body is a testament to this. You develop a deep, persistent pain in your lower back. It's a result of a lifetime of standing and walking with an unnatural posture. Your body constantly tilted forward to balance on your heels. Your knees, too, are a source of chronic pain. They have been under constant, abnormal stress since you learned to walk on your broken feet. Then there are the hidden problems. Because of your altered gait and the way you have to hold your pelvic muscles to maintain balance, you experienced great difficulty in childbirth. This was a common, though often unspoken, tragedy. The very practice meant to make you a more desirable wife and mother often made the act of becoming a mother more dangerous and painful. This brings us to a specific and rather sad piece of medical trivia related to the practice: phantom limb pain. Even though your toes have been folded under your foot for decades, your brain's map of your body still remembers where they are supposed to be. Many women with bound feet reported experiencing strange, itching, or painful sensations that seemed to come from their ghost toes, the ones crushed into the soles of their feet. It was a neurological echo of the violence that had been done to them, a pain that existed not just in their flesh, but in their very mind. You sometimes feel an itch in a place you cannot possibly scratch, a ghostly reminder of the foot you were born with. You watch your own young daughter as she runs freely in the courtyard, her feet strong and whole. A familiar anxiety begins to gnaw at you. Soon, the decision will have to be made. the cycle will have to begin again. You look at your mother-in-law, now a frail old woman who can barely move from her bed to her chair. She is cared for by servants, but her immobility is now absolute. She is a prisoner in her own body. You see your own future in her. The historical debate here centers on whether the long-term health consequences were widely understood at the time. Did mothers know that by binding their daughters' feet, they were predisposing them to a lifetime of chronic pain, circulatory problems, and dangerous falls in old age? Most historians believe that they did not, at least not in a clinical, scientific sense. The connection between a fall in old age and a decision made 70 years prior was not one people were equipped to make. They saw the immediate risks: infection, gangrene, death. But the slow, creeping, cumulative damage was likely seen as just a natural part of a woman's aging process. The true, lifelong cost of the golden lotus was largely invisible to those who perpetuated it. You now represent that cost. You are a successful woman by every standard of your society. You have a good husband, sons, and a respected place in a powerful family. Your feet are considered beautiful. You have won the game. But the prize is a body racked with chronic pain and a future of ever-decreasing mobility. You have everything you were ever taught to want, but you are paying for it with the currency of your own well-being. A debt that will only grow larger with each passing year. The world beyond your courtyard walls is changing in ways you cannot comprehend. Strange rumors and unsettling stories begin to arrive, carried by merchants and officials traveling from the coastal cities. They speak of ocean men or yang ren, people with pale skin, round eyes of blue and grey, and hair the color of straw. They say these foreigners are flooding into the empire, bringing with them powerful weapons, strange new machines, and even stranger ideas. Your first direct encounter with this new world is startling. A delegation of foreign merchants is granted a rare audience with your father-in-law, out of curiosity. You and the other women of the household peek through the latticework of a screen that separates the inner quarters from the main hall. You see them. They are giants, taller than any Chinese man you have ever seen. They wear bizarre, constricting clothes. But the most shocking thing is the woman who is with them. She is the wife of one of the merchants. She is dressed in a voluminous gown, but you can see her feet. She strides across the room with a confidence that borders on aggressive. Her feet are enormous, encased in sturdy leather boots. She moves with a freedom and energy that you find both repulsive and deeply, secretly fascinating. You hear your mother-in-law gasp. "Like a man," she whispers in disgust. Completely uncivilized. This is the moment of cultural collision, a key historical turning point. For the first time, your world's most cherished beauty standard is being seen through an entirely different lens. To the Westerners arriving in China in the 19th century, the missionaries, the merchants, the diplomats, footbinding was not beautiful. It was grotesque, barbaric, and monstrous. It became one of the primary symbols they used to portray China as a backward, sick, and unenlightened society in need of saving. The foreign woman's reaction to you is just as strong. Later, you learn from a servant that she caught a glimpse of you and your sisters-in-law. The servant says the foreign woman stared at your tiny, swaying gait with a look of undisguised horror. She apparently asked her translator, in a loud, shocked voice, what is wrong with their feet? Are they ill? Have they been in a terrible accident? Her perspective is so alien it's almost incomprehensible. She sees your greatest accomplishment, your badge of honor, your symbol of refinement, as a deformity, a sickness. The idea that this could be done intentionally, for the sake of beauty, is something that, according to the translator, she simply could not process. This culture clash brings us to a specific and crucial piece of trivia: the role of Christian missionaries. While merchants and diplomats were horrified by footbinding, it was the missionaries who decided to do something about it. They saw the practice as a profound moral evil and a major obstacle to converting Chinese people to Christianity. Missionary doctors began to publish medical treatises detailing the gruesome health consequences. Missionary wives began setting up the first schools for Chinese girls, with one absolute, Non-negotiable condition for enrollment: the girl's feet had to be unbound. For many Chinese girls, the first chance they ever had at a formal education was conditional on rejecting this core tenet of their culture. You start to hear about these missionaries. They are setting up chapels and hospitals in the nearby city. They preach a strange religion. But more disturbingly, they preach against your way of life. They tell people that binding a girl's feet is a sin against their God. They call it child abuse and torture. The historical debate here revolves around the motives and impact of this foreign intervention. Was it a noble, humanitarian effort to end a harmful practice, or was it a form of cultural imperialism? An arrogant attempt to impose Western values on another society? Some scholars argue that the missionaries were genuinely moved by compassion and a sense of justice. They saw immense suffering and tried to alleviate it. Others argue that their campaign against footbinding was also a strategic tool. By saving Chinese women from this barbaric practice, they could demonstrate the supposed moral superiority of Christianity and Western civilization, thus making their colonial project more palatable. The reality, as is often the case, is likely a complex mixture of both. You, however, experience this not as a complex geopolitical debate, but as a deeply personal attack. These outsiders, these blue-eyed devils, are looking at you, at your mother, at your ancestors, and calling you all monsters. They are taking your source of pride and turning it into a mark of shame. The secure, ordered world you have always known is being challenged, not by a rival family or a different dynasty, but by an idea from a world away, and for the first time in your life, you feel a flicker of doubt. Is it possible that the thing you have sacrificed everything for is not beautiful, but ugly? The question is so terrifying you push it away immediately. But it has been planted. The walls of your courtyard no longer feel quite so secure. The seed of doubt planted by the foreigners begins to find fertile ground, not just in your mind, but in the minds of a new generation of Chinese intellectuals. The world is changing with terrifying speed. The Qing dynasty is weakening. Humbled in wars against the foreign powers, new ideas are flooding into the country, and people are beginning to question everything. Your sons, who are now young men studying in the provincial capital, come home with shocking new perspectives. They no longer speak of the classics with the same reverence. They talk of science, progress, and national strength. They argue that China is weak because it is bound by old, harmful traditions, and the tradition they attack with the most vehemence is footbinding. It is a national disgrace. Your eldest son declares one evening, his voice full of a passion that shocks the family, "We cripple half our population and then wonder why the foreigners laugh at us. How can a nation be strong if its mothers are invalids?" To hear these words from your own son is a profound betrayal. He is looking at you, at his own mother, and seeing not a symbol of refinement, but a symbol of national weakness. The very thing you endured to secure a good future for him, he now sees as a source of shame. This is the great historical shift. The argument against footbinding moved from a foreign critique to an internal one. It was no longer about what was beautiful, it was about what would make China strong. This new movement gives rise to one of the most important social campaigns of modern Chinese history, the Natural Foot Society, or Qianziyu Hui Tianzuhui. It was founded in the 1892 by a coalition of Chinese reformers and their Western missionary allies. They didn't just write essays, they were brilliant community organizers. They held public meetings, published pamphlets with graphic medical diagrams showing the damage of binding, and preached a new gospel of national survival. Their message was simple: a modern China needed modern women, and modern women needed natural feet to be healthy mothers and productive citizens. You hear about a meeting of this Natural Foot Society being held in your city. Your sons attend, much to your husband's disgust. They come back energized, carrying pamphlets. You secretly look at one. It shows a cross-section of a bound foot next to a skeleton of a healthy foot. The image is stark, scientific, and deeply unsettling. It strips away all the poetry and romance, leaving only the brutal medical reality. This leads to a fascinating and very clever piece of trivia about how the movement succeeded the invention of the anti-footbinding pledge. The reformers understood the core problem. My father wouldn't unbind his daughter because he feared she wouldn't be able to find a suitable husband. No man wanted a big-footed wife. To break this cycle, the Natural Foot Society created pacts. A group of progressive families would get together and sign a pledge. The fathers would promise not to bind their daughters' feet. And, crucially, they would promise that their sons would only marry women with natural feet. It was a brilliant social hack. It created a new, alternative marriage market. Suddenly, having unbound feet was not a liability, but an asset for marrying into a modern, forward-thinking family. Your own family becomes a battleground. Your eldest son announces that he will not marry the girl his father has arranged for him. Because she has bound feet, he wants to marry the daughter of his professor, a well-known reformer, whose feet are natural. The crisis is immense. It pits father against son, tradition against progress, the old China against the new. The historical debate here centers on the role of feminism in this early movement. Was the anti-footbinding campaign a true feminist movement? Some scholars say yes, arguing it was the first major step towards women's liberation in China, freeing them from a crippling patriarchal practice. Others argue that it was more a nationalist movement than a feminist one. They point out that the main argument used by male reformers like your son was not about women's individual rights or their suffering, but about their utility to the nation. Women needed to be unbound so they could produce stronger sons and be better, more efficient workers for the good of the state. The woman's body was still being seen as an instrument, just for a different purpose, not for familial honor, but for national glory. You are caught in the crossfire. Your whole life, your identity, is built upon a foundation that your own children are now trying to smash. You look at your own young daughter, who is now 6 years old. The auspicious day, according to the old almanac, is approaching. It is the age you were when your own feet were broken. Your mother-in-law insists it is time. Your husband agrees, out of respect for tradition. Your sons are horrified. And you are torn. To bind her feet would be to carry on the 1,000-year-old legacy of your ancestors. To refuse would be to embrace a new world you do not understand. A world that sees you as a relic. The choice feels impossible. The battle in your family is a mirror of the battle raging across all of China. The old world is dying, and a new one is struggling to be born. In the end, a compromise is reached, which feels like a defeat. You do not bind your daughter's feet. The argument of your sons, fueled by the unstoppable tide of progress, wins out. Your mother-in-law is furious. Your husband quietly resigned. You have broken the chain. Your daughter will grow up with strong, healthy feet. She will be able to run, to jump, to walk for miles. She will go to one of the new schools for girls and learn to read and write, not just embroidery. Her future will be completely different from yours. And as you watch her grow, a strange and painful feeling blossoms in your heart. It is a mixture of relief, pride, and a profound, bitter jealousy. You have saved her from the pain, but you have also made yourself obsolete. Your own feet, once your greatest source of pride and status, are rapidly becoming a symbol of everything that is considered backward, futile, and shameful. The world is turned upside down. The very thing that made you a perfect lady now marks you as an ignorant relic of a bygone era. It's like discovering that a beautiful, precious jewel you've cherished your whole life is actually a worthless, ugly rock. This is the mainstream historical experience of the last generation of women with bound feet. As the 20th century progressed and the anti-footbinding movement became official government policy, first under the New Republic and then even more forcefully under the communists, the golden lotus went from being a beauty mark to a stigma. Women who had been celebrated for their small feet were now ridiculed. You experience this shift in cruel, personal ways. You go into the city, and young, modern students with their unbound feet and Western-style clothes stare at your swaying walk. You hear them snicker and whisper the new, insulting term for women like you xiao jiaoi lao tai po xiao jia lot tai po. Little-footed old crone. The words are a slap in the face. You, who were once the pinnacle of refinement, are now a caricature, a joke. This transition created a strange psychological limbo, which is a fascinating, you said, piece of historical trivia. Many women, unable to cope with this sudden reversal of values, refused to ever unbend their feet, even when encouraged to do so. Their feet were a source of deep, lifelong pain, but they were also the core of their identity. To unbind them would be to admit that their entire life, their suffering, and their pride had been a terrible mistake, so they clung to their bindings as a last vestige of their old identity, even as the world mobbed them for it. They chose to remain in their physical and psychological prison rather than face the emptiness of a life redefined as meaningless. You kept your feet bound. The thought of unwrapping them for good, of letting them spread out into their true, deformed shape, is terrifying. The bindings are all that hold you together, both literally and figuratively. You're beautiful. Tiny shoes are your last connection to the world that made sense, the world where you knew your value. The historical debate here centers on the legacy of the practice. How should we remember footbinding? Is it a simple story of patriarchal oppression and eventual liberation, or is it more complicated? Some revisionist historians and anthropologists caution against a purely Western feminist reading of the practice. They argue that we must also try to understand the internal logic of the culture, the genuine pride and a sense of aesthetic accomplishment that women felt. To simply label it as barbaric is to dismiss the complex inner lives and motivations of millions of women like you. It risks replacing one form of judgment with another. The challenge is to condemn the cruelty of the practice without condemning the women who were its victims and, simultaneously, its most ardent participants. You are now an old woman. The Qing dynasty has fallen. The world is full of cars, electric lights, and ideas that are completely alien to you. Your daughter is a teacher. Her feet are large and strong. She loves you. She respects you. But she looks at you with a kind of gentle pity that is almost harder to bear than the ridicule of strangers. You are a living fossil. Your feet are not just feet anymore. They are a historical artifact, a museum piece. They are the beautiful, painful, 3-inch prison that holds the ghost of a world that is gone forever. Your world has shrunk to a single room, a single chair by the window. You are one of the last, the great, tumultuous waves of history that have crashed over China, the fall of the empire, the wars with Japan, the rise of the communists have all happened outside your window. You have been a spectator to the century, a stationary observer. Your bound feet, which once locked you into a life of refined leisure, have now locked you out of the modern world. You watch your granddaughters. They wear practical, unisex blue jackets, just like their brothers. They march off to school with revolutionary zeal. They are healthy, sturdy feet carrying them towards a future you can't even imagine. They are taught to see you as a symbol of the feudal oppression that the new China has heroically overcome. They are kind to you, but you are a history lesson to them, not a grandmother. This is the final chapter in the long story of footbinding, the mainstream historical consensus on its end. The practice, already in steep decline, was effectively eradicated by the communist government after 1949. It was condemned as one of the most potent symbols of the old society. Mass campaigns were launched to liberate the remaining women with bound feet. Unbinding was no longer a choice, it was often a political mandate. Women were forced to attend public meetings where they were shamed for their feudal feet. It was a final, brutal reversal. The very thing that had been a requirement for social acceptance became a mark of political incorrectness, a crime against the new state. You are too old, too insignificant for them to bother with now. You are left alone with your memories and your pain. You spend your days looking at your collection of Lotus shoes, hidden away in a wooden box. Each pair is a memory. The first red pair your mother gave you. The elaborate, phoenix-embroidered pair from your wedding. The dozens of pairs you made for yourself over a lifetime. They are like a photo album of a life that has been erased. To your granddaughters, they are curious artifacts. To you, they are your soul. This brings us to one of the last poignant pieces of trivia from this dying world, the Lotus shoe artisans of the late 20th century. As the last generation of women with bound feet aged and died, a handful of collectors and historians rushed to preserve their shoes. But they also found a few elderly craftsmen, often in remote villages, who still remembered how to make the special, tiny shoes. These artisans will create new Lotus shoes, not for women to wear, but for tourists and collectors. The shoe, once a living part of a brutal tradition, had its final transformation into a commercial souvenir, a piece of oriental kitsch, completely divorced from the pain and the complex social reality it once represented. You are approached one day by a young woman from the city. She is a photographer, a historian. She comes with a camera and a notebook. She wants to document your life. She asks you questions about the binding, about the pain, about your marriage. She handles your old shoes with a reverence that surprises you. She calls them works of art. She asks to photograph your bare feet. You are shocked. You have never shown your bare feet to anyone but your mother and, later, yourself. They are your deepest, most private shame and secret. That you are old, and the world has changed so much. What is there left to hide hesitantly? You are grey. You unwrap the bindings one last time. The long, faded cloth unfurls like a snake shedding its skin. You expose your feet to the camera's eye. They are pale, gnarled, and shockingly small. The toes are cramped, discolored ridge under the sole. The arch is a deep, shadowed canyon. They are the physical evidence of 1,000 years of history, written onto your flesh and bone. The young woman looks at them, her face a mixture of scientific curiosity and human pity. She doesn't say beautiful or ugly. She just says, "Thank you for showing me." The historical debate at this final stage is one of memory and preservation. How should this history be remembered? Is it enough to simply record the facts? Anthropologists and oral historians have argued that the most important thing is to capture the voices of the women themselves, to hear their stories in their own words, the pain, yes, but also the pride, the competition, the sense of identity, the complicated love for the mothers who bound them. Without their voices, the story is just a collection of bones and artifacts. It's their memories that give the history its soul. The young photographer, in her own way, is part of this final effort. After she leaves, you sit alone in your chair. The sun is setting. You look down at your bare, exposed feet. They are no longer a source of pride or shame. They are just a part of you. They are the map of your journey. They are the story of your life, a life that is almost over. The sun hangs low in the sky, painting the paper of your window a warm, dusty gold. The sounds from the world outside have faded into a distant hum. The shouts of children playing, the rumble of passing trucks, the political slogans chanted in the square, they all belong to a different world, a different time. Your world has become this room, this chair, this light. You close your eyes. The ever-present take in your feet is still there, a loyal companion to the very end. But you are no longer fighting it. You are no longer analyzing it. It simply is, like the color of the sky, or the scent of the sweet olive tree that blooms outside your window every autumn. It is a part of the landscape of your being. Your mind begins to drift, untethered from the present. It floats back, not as a coherent memory, but as a series of scattered feelings, like old, faded photographs. You feel the sun on your face in a dusty courtyard. You feel the rough, warm earth under your bare feet. You are running, a little girl with a tiger hat. Your legs strong and tireless. The world is huge and full of possibilities. The joy of that feeling is so pure, so sharp. It's almost a pain in your chest. Then, another feeling. The weight of your mother's hands on your foot. The strange mixture of her love and her terrible resolve. You feel the first crushing pressure. The beginning of the end of that other life. You remember the hot tears on your face. And you remember seeing the tears on hers. It wasn't hatred that broke your feet. It was a kind of desperate, misguided love. A love so tangled up in tradition and fear that it could only express itself through violence. This is the central, heartbreaking truth you have spent a lifetime trying to understand. The memories flash and swirl. The pride of your first pair of scarlet shoes. The sting of your mother-in-law's disapproval. The soft, appreciative look in your husband's eyes as you swayed past him. The jeers of the young students in the street. The pity in your own daughter's eyes. It was all real. The pride was as real as the pain. The honor was as real as the shame. It all existed together. A bundle of contradictions that made up a life. What is the final judgment on this 1,000-year-old story? Who was wrong? The question seems pointless now. The world that created the golden lotus is gone. It has vanished as completely as the smoke from the incense your grandmother used to burn. It was a world with its own logic, its own definition of beauty, its own code of honor. It was a world that demanded a terrible price from its women for the promise of security and status. You paid that price. A strange peace settles over you. You are not a symbol of feudal oppression. You are not a work of art. You are not a historical artifact. You are just a woman who lived the life she was given. You endured. You adapted. You found moments of pride and beauty in a world of pain and constraint. You loved your children. And you saved your daughter from your own fate. Perhaps that is enough. The final historical debate is one of legacy. What did this 1,000-year custom leave behind? It left behind millions of broken bodies. It left behind a powerful and cautionary tale about the intersection of beauty, power, and pain. And it left behind a quiet, stubborn testament to the resilience of women. It is a story about how women, trapped within an oppressive system, still found ways to create art, to build communities, to exercise power, and to endure. It's a legacy of suffering, but also, in its own complicated way, a legacy of strength. You think of the young photographer. You hope she tells your story, not just the story of the broken bones, but the story of the embroidered shoes, the story of the mother's tears, the story of the daughter's pride. You hope she understands that it was all one story. The light from the window is fading now, turning from gold to a soft, dusky violet. The ache in your feet seems to be fading with it. You feel light. You feel as if you could float up from your chair, out the window, and back to that sunny courtyard a lifetime ago. You feel the wind in your hair, and you begin to run. The story is over now. The courtyard is quiet. The dust has settled. The echoes of 1,000 years of tiny, painful steps have finally faded into the earth. Let the weight of that history drift away. Like smoke on the wind, your own body feels light, untethered, floating in the gentle space between wakefulness and sleep. The images of the past recede, replaced by the soft, dark curtain of the approaching dream. There is no more pain, no more struggle. There is only a deep, quiet stillness, the sway of the willow tree, the scent of the night-blooming jasmine, the vast, silent turning of the stars. You are drifting on a calm, dark river, carried gently toward the morning. Every breath you take is easy. Every muscle is relaxed. You are safe. You are at peace. Let the current take you. Let the last vestiges of the story dissolve into the deep, healing quiet of your own mind. Sleep now. Just sleep. The end of the article. Good night.